Widespread pay cuts in China drive down consumer spending, fuel deflationary fears. In mid-2025, a wave of salary cuts and layoffs is rolling through China, touching nearly every sector of the economy, from central government offices in Beijing to provincial agencies to the glittering headquarters of state-owned enterprises once thought untouchable. For many, it is the most dramatic income contraction in decades. Civil servants, financial professionals, police officers, and factory managers alike find their monthly wages suddenly reduced, their allowances stripped, and their sense of stability shaken. Radio Free Asia's reporting has revealed a pattern. What once seemed isolated cases of optimization or cost controls have become systemic, sweeping across both the public and private sectors. The result is not only shrinking household budgets but also collapsing consumer confidence. Families are slashing spending, small businesses are engaged in destructive price wars, and economists warn of deflationary spirals. Li, an employee of a Beijing-based state-owned enterprise, once took home 6,000 yuan, approximately $835 a month. Now, he earns only 5,000 yuan, around $696. Some allowances have been removed too, he explained. His wife's company has already issued layoff notices to some staff, warning that their employment will end in July. For middle-class families like Li's, such reductions mean no more weekend dinners out, fewer family trips, and constant anxiety over bills. In Zhejiang, one of China's wealthiest provinces, the cuts are even starker. Zhang, a resident of Zhuji City, said ordinary civil servants have lost between 50,000 and 60,000 yuan, about $6,964 to $8,356 annually. Senior officials face deeper cuts of 80,000 to 100,000 yuan, roughly $11,100 to $13,900. For higher-level cadres, reductions reach as high as 150,000 yuan, close to $2,890. There was already a reduction 2 years ago. This year's salary is reduced again, Cheng told RFA. Across Guangdong, the story repeats itself. Real estate projects have stalled for 2 years, land sales, once a critical source of government revenue, have dried up, and fiscal debts have ballooned. Gang, a Qingdao resident, described how county and township-level officials endure 30% pay cuts, with salaries often delayed. Even police officers have lost benefits, he said. In Guangdong, a legal professional reported that police salaries dropped from 300,000 yuan, around $41,784 annually, to 200,000 yuan, approximately $27,856. A crisis rooted in government finances. China's salary crisis cannot be separated from the larger financial distress gripping local governments. For years, provinces relied on land sales to property developers to fuel budgets. With the property market in free fall, this source of revenue has collapsed. In 2025, provincial governments set average revenue growth targets at just 2.8%, down 1.6 points from the previous year. The once ambitious fiscal outlook has turned cautious, reflecting reality. There is simply less money. Shandong's empty construction sites tell the story. Once filled with cranes, they now stand silent, half-finished towers, becoming symbols of a stalled economy. With no land transfer fees, counties are forced to slash payrolls. The ripple effect spreads. Civil servants with lighter pay packets spend less at local shops. Restaurants cut staff, and suppliers fold. The fiscal contraction feeds directly into social contraction. Salary cuts at China's financial giants. Even the titans of China's financial sector, institutions like China International Capital Corp, CICC, and China Development Bank, are not immune. Under Beijing's campaign to cap pay at financial institutions in the name of common prosperity, banks and investment houses have imposed sweeping cuts. One CICC employee admitted, "Almost everyone in our building has had their salaries cut. The lowest level employees lost 5%, but mid and senior staff lost far more." Caixin reported that 27 state-owned financial enterprises are already implementing caps, ensuring no annual salary exceeds 1 million yuan, $139,180.00. Ma, another SOE employee in Beijing, described 2 rounds of cuts since 2023. The basic salary has shrunk, meal and transport subsidies are gone, the workload that used to be handled by 2 or 3 people is now done by 1. In Guangdong's Dongguan City, a state-owned bank employee reported a 30% salary cut over 2 years and said bonuses have almost completely disappeared. The consumer belt-tightening chain. When civil servants, bankers, and police officers, traditionally considered secure professions, cut spending, the effects ripple across society. Restaurants see fewer customers, shopping malls lose foot traffic, and even holiday gatherings shrink. Meng, a Shandong resident, said, "The good ribs here sell for just 12 yuan, $1.67 per pound. Restaurants are offering desperate discounts. This isn't healthy competition, it's mutual destruction." In Beijing, Su, a resident of Haidian district, noted that small supermarkets are slashing prices like crazy. She fears many will go bankrupt within months. In her own home, Su sees fewer dinners with relatives and more caution at the checkout counter. Economist Wu Xianxue warned that this is more than a temporary dip. The government has no money to manage people, and no one is willing to spend money. From salary cuts within the system to the collapse of consumption among ordinary people, society is forming a top-down tightening chain. The most worrying consequence of these salary cuts is deflation. As consumers spend less, businesses compete by slashing prices. Falling prices may sound good for shoppers, but in macroeconomic terms, deflation traps economies. Profits shrink, companies cut wages further, investment halts, and debt burdens grow. Japan's lost decades are a haunting precedent. Already, China shows early signs. Consumer goods sales fell nearly 10% in Beijing and 14.1% in Shanghai in March 2025. Despite government efforts to boost demand, stimulus policies launched in both cities failed to revive spending. Instead, bargain wars deepen the spiral. When a supermarket sells below cost just to survive, it accelerates collapse rather than preventing it. The deeper issue lies in the psychological blow to the middle class. Civil servants, police officers, and SOE employees once formed the backbone of stability. Their salaries might not have been glamorous, but they were steady, and with them came a sense of social contract, loyalty in exchange for security. That contract is breaking when officers see benefits vanish, when teachers face delays in pay, when bank staff lose bonuses. Trust erodes. Families who once borrowed confidently for homes or cars now hesitate. Consumer sentiment surveys show rising pessimism. A culture of belt-tightening replaces one of aspiration. The long-term implications of these cuts are severe. With land sales no longer viable, governments face structural revenue shortfalls. Raising taxes risks backlash. Printing money risks inflation. Thus, the axe falls on salaries, the easiest but most socially destabilizing choice. Meanwhile, businesses dependent on consumer demand suffer. From e-commerce giants like JD.com to small street vendors, the downturn is visible. Even as new malls open in Beijing with flashy demonstrations, foot traffic is thin. The mismatch between glossy infrastructure and empty wallets grows wider. If trends continue, China risks entering a deflationary trap. Declining wages, declining consumption, and declining growth, feeding one another in a vicious loop. The collapse of China's subway myth, layoffs, ghost stations, and mounting losses. In recent weeks, shocking news has emerged from Shanghai. The city's proud subway system, once hailed as one of the most profitable in the world, has begun mass layoffs. The first round alone cut 2,000 employees, targeting older workers over the age of 50. For an industry that has long pointed to Shanghai Metro as the golden standard of success, the fact that it was the first to wield the axe sent tremors across the sector. Beijing immediately convened late-night meetings to study Shanghai's layoff model. Guangzhou rushed out what it called a voluntary resignation plan, while Shenzhen was even more blunt, channeling its resources into so-called smart operations, essentially a euphemism for automation-driven staff cuts. Overnight, subways across China seemed to move in lockstep, tightening their belts and downsizing. The reason is stark. Ticket revenues alone cannot sustain China's subways. Their only lifeline has been government subsidies. Strip away those subsidies, and of the 28 major subway systems across the country, only Shanghai and Fuzhou managed to scrape by without bleeding red ink. The rest are financial disasters. The numbers paint a grim picture. Beijing posted losses of 21.7 billion yuan, Chengdu 7 billion, Changsha 1.1 billion, Qingdao 8.8 billion, Guangzhou 7.1 billion, Chongqing 4.3 billion, and Shenzhen a staggering 40.7 billion yuan. Even Shanghai, the supposed outlier, barely eked out a surplus of just 42 million yuan, a figure so small it may as well be zero. The underlying dynamics are unsustainable. Passenger growth in Shanghai, for example, has collapsed from 12% in 2019 to a mere 3% today. At the same time, labor costs rise relentlessly. Each additional kilometer of track requires 170 more government-paid staff, adding an impossible burden. Without new revenue sources, every expansion project pushes these systems closer to the abyss of massive deficit. This explains why automation is spreading so quickly. Smart stations now cut staff from 12 to just 4 per site. Beijing's driverless lines have eliminated human drivers altogether. What we are witnessing is not just a cost-cutting exercise, but the end of an era. From 2010 to 2023, China experienced a breakneck subway boom, laying tracks at a pace unmatched by any other nation. Subways became symbols of modernity and political triumph. Local governments tied their land financing models to the promise of subway lines, using the slogan, "When the subway arrives, gold flows in." But that golden age is over. Land-based revenues have dried up, debt has piled high, and the once celebrated expansion has become an anchor dragging cities down. Constructing a single kilometer of subway requires between 600 million and 1.2 billion yuan. The financial strain is simply too much for local authorities, already suffocating under mountains of debt. What was once hailed as a miracle of infrastructure now reads like a cruel irony. The collapse of the myth is visible not only in balance sheets but in the absurdity of China's so-called ghost stations. Across the country, gleaming new subway exits emerge in barren fields, among corn crops, or at the foot of mountains with no residents in sight. In some places, stepping out of a station leads directly to farmland or cemeteries. Locals joke that you can farm, graze cattle, or climb a hillside the moment you exit. Entire stretches of infrastructure stand unused, serving as monuments to overbuilding. Videos shared online show ghostly stations in Chongqing, Tianjin, Nanning, Shenzhen, Nanjing, Jiangsu, and Guiyang. Vast empty halls surrounded by wilderness, with not a single passenger in sight. Some stations have remained unopened for more than a decade, their entrances locked and overgrown, with no official explanation. Property buyers, lured by promises of future subway access, discovered they had been duped. Houses purchased near planned stations turned out to be speculative gambles, with the supposed lines delayed endlessly or abandoned outright. In major hubs, commercial centers that once thrived alongside subway stops now lie shuttered. Even popular malls like Times Digital Plaza could not withstand the slowdown, collapsing despite prime locations. Hospitals and shops across once buzzy districts are empty shells, casualties of a bubble built on false promises of endless growth. The irony grows darker when one considers how deep some of these stations are built. Passengers complain about exhausting journeys climbing out of cavernous tunnels, likening it to Pyongyang's notorious deep metro, or even a pilgrimage to the western heaven. In smaller cities, rural-style dirt paths connect isolated stations to nearby villages, where locals still farm and graze animals. In one case, commuters stepping out of a subway station in Jiangsu found themselves staring at nothing but endless farmland and vegetable plots. Others in Guangzhou or Chengdu walked out of brand-new stations straight into cornfields or wilderness. The absurdity is not lost on citizens. You think you've entered the city, but actually you're still in the countryside, one resident remarked bitterly. These ghost stations have become internet phenomena. Netizens post videos of themselves emerging from empty stations into fields, mountains, or deserted lots, shaking their heads in disbelief. Many openly question why such stations were built at all, pointing out the grotesque waste of taxpayer money. China may have the most advanced infrastructure in the world, one sarcastic post reads, but no other country could match this level of extravagance and absurdity. Indeed, while the interiors of some lines boast clean modern trains with Wi-Fi, charging ports, and even baggage racks, the reality outside the exits is grim: desolation, decay, and debt. The story of China's subway system is no longer one of progress, but of overreach. The drive to expand at all costs has left behind a trail of hollow assets and crushing losses. What once symbolized urban modernity now exposes the failures of China's development model. Instead of fueling prosperity, subways have become black holes, sucking in public money. Cities now face the dual crises of ballooning deficits and declining ridership. Families that invested in property near lines are left with worthless assets. Workers who dedicated decades to these systems are being discarded, and across the nation, gleaming stations in barren fields stand as haunting reminders of a grand illusion. The myth of the subway boom that every new line would guarantee prosperity has collapsed. The reality is a network of empty trains, vanishing passengers, and governments drowning in debt. Layoffs in Shanghai were only the beginning. As more cities follow suit, the world is beginning to see what China's citizens already know. The age of reckless expansion is over, and the bill has come due.